I didn't know a single word could undo 2 years of love. Not shouted, not thrown in my face, not even said to me directly. I heard it by accident, standing in a hallway that echoed too well. Ugly, that was the word. Not cruelly, not angrily, just casually, like a fact everyone already agreed on. I remember freezing in place, my hand still on the doorframe, my heart pounding so loudly, I was sure they could hear it from the living room. I was supposed to be in the bathroom. They thought I was. They were laughing. Not hysterical laughter, not mocking, the soft, knowing kind. The kind people share when something uncomfortable has been said, but true. And the worst part? My boyfriend laughed too. I'm Emily, 28 years old. I had been with Kieran for just over 2 years. 2 years of him telling me I was beautiful. 2 years of him holding my hand in public, posting pictures of us online, telling me I was the best thing in his life. 2 years of believing, really believing, that I had finally outrun the version of myself who grew up hiding from mirrors. Because I used to be the girl no one looked at twice. The girl whose body was always the punchline. The girl who learned early that if you laughed first, it hurt less. And somehow I thought I'd escape that story. Until his sister said it out loud. Until he didn't stop her. Until I realized that maybe all those compliments, all that reassurance, all that love had come with an unspoken footnote. You're not attractive, you're just good enough. I sat through the rest of that evening smiling like nothing was wrong. I let him touch my arm. I let him ask if I was okay. And all I could think was, if the man who loves me agrees I'm ugly, what does that say about me? I didn't confront him that night. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went home with him. And over the next few weeks, I watched my confidence collapse quietly, piece by piece, while he tried harder than ever to convince me everything was fine. That was when I knew. This wasn't just about attraction. It was about truth. And once you hear it, you can never unhear it. I wish I could say my confidence was always solid, that one overheard conversation couldn't possibly shake me. But the truth is, my self-esteem was never a fortress. It was more like a carefully built house of cards, pretty from a distance, stable as long as no one breathed too hard in its direction. Growing up, I was the big girl. Not the kind people compliment, not the kind teachers pick for presentations, not the kind boys develop harmless little crushes on. I was the girl who learned to walk slightly behind everyone else, so I wouldn't take up too much space in the group. The girl who mastered the art of laughing at her own body before anyone else could. The girl who pretended she didn't care, because caring would have meant admitting how much it hurt. Middle school was the worst. I can still remember the cafeteria smell. Greasy fries, warm milk cartons, cheap pizza, and how my stomach would tighten before I even stepped inside. I'd scan the tables like I was looking for a safe exit route. Sometimes I'd sit alone, telling myself I preferred it. Other times I'd join a group and stay quiet, terrified that if I talked too much, someone would notice me. By high school, I'd developed habits that followed me like shadows. I avoided mirrors unless I had to. I wore layers even when it was hot. I took up less space in photos by standing slightly behind someone else. I kept my head down when I walked. Like eye contact was a challenge I didn't deserve to pass. College didn't magically fix anything. It just gave my insecurities a more mature outfit to hide under. I studied computer science, partly because I genuinely liked it, and partly because it felt safer to be the smart girl than to ever hope to be the pretty girl. In lecture halls, I sat near the back. In group projects, I spoke only when necessary. In social situations, I smiled a lot and made jokes to keep people from looking too closely at me. Then, in my junior year, something shifted. Not overnight, not in some dramatic movie montage, just slowly. One morning, I woke up and realized I was tired of feeling invisible. Tired of avoiding life because I didn't like the body I lived in. Tired of treating my appearance like a punishment I had to carry around. Tired of waiting for some imaginary day when I'd suddenly feel worthy. So I started going to the gym. At 5 a.m. when it was nearly empty. I told myself it was for convenience, but really, it was because I couldn't handle the thought of people watching me. The first few weeks were humiliating. The bright fluorescent lights, the squeak of sneakers on rubber floor, the sound of weights clanking like everyone else knew what they were doing, and I was just pretending. I'd keep my headphones in even when no music was playing, just so no one would talk to me. I'd stare at the treadmill timer like it was a finish line I had to survive. And then I changed my diet. Not in some extreme way, just consistently. The kind of consistency that's boring and unglamorous and lonely sometimes. The kind that doesn't give you applause, only quiet progress. Over the next 2 years, my body changed. I lost around 80 pounds, built some muscle, learned how to stand straighter without thinking about it, learned how to take a compliment without immediately rejecting it. But the mental part? That was harder. Even when I was smaller, I still felt like the same girl. Like the old version of me was hiding under my skin, waiting for someone to confirm she was still there. That's why Kieran felt like a miracle. I met him about 2.5 years ago at a coffee shop near my office. I was sitting alone with my laptop, working, half listening to the low hum of people ordering drinks. My screen was filled with code, and I was focused in that intense, tunnel vision way I get when I'm trying to solve a problem. Then someone stopped beside my table. A voice, warm, casual, said, "Hey, is anyone sitting here? Everywhere else is full." I looked up and saw him. He had this easy kind of confidence, not arrogant, not performative, just comfortable, like he belonged in his own skin. I remember hesitating, then nodding and saying, "No, go ahead." He sat down with a book in his hand and a coffee that smelled like cinnamon. We made small talk at first, about the cafe being too crowded, about how impossible it was to find quiet places to work these days. Then he asked what I was doing. I told him I worked in software. He asked what kind. I explained, expecting his eyes to glaze over. They didn't. He listened. Actually listened, like what I said mattered. And before I realized it, an hour became 2, 2 became 3. When he finally stood up to leave, he smiled like we'd been friends for years and said, "This might sound forward, but can I get your number?" My brain stalled, because men didn't usually ask me that. Not directly, not confidently, not like they were certain they wanted me. I gave it to him anyway, and the second he walked out, I stared at my phone like it might explode. That was the beginning. The first few dates felt unreal. He complimented me constantly. Too constantly at first. "God, you're pretty. I love your smile. That color looks amazing on you." The first time he told me I looked good in a shirt, I went home and hung it in the front of my closet like it was something valuable. I didn't even realize how starved I'd been for that kind of affection until he gave it to me so freely. 6 months into dating, we were walking downtown and I made one of my usual jokes. Something self-deprecating, something automatic. He stopped walking, turned to face me, and he said calmly, firmly, like he was correcting something that should have been corrected years ago, "Don't talk about yourself like that. You're attractive. I wouldn't be with you if I didn't want you." The way he said "want you," it made my throat tighten. Because it wasn't pity, it sounded like certainty. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe him. Kieran also had social media more than I did. He posted his design work, lifestyle photos, little snapshots of his life. He had a decent following on Instagram. Sometimes he posted pictures of us together, but I noticed something odd early on. He would turn off the comments. When I asked him why, he shrugged and said, "People online can be jerks. I don't feel like dealing with strangers being weird about my relationship." At the time, it felt protective, like he was shielding us from unnecessary noise. I appreciated it. I didn't question it. Because why would I? I was too busy feeling chosen. The more time we spent together, the more my confidence grew. He'd hold my hand in public like he was proud of me. He'd introduce me to friends with this casual pride in his voice. "This is Emily." And slowly, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the girl from the cafeteria anymore. Then, about 3 months ago, he told me he wanted me to meet his family. His parents lived far away, but his older sister Morgan lived about an hour from us. He mentioned her like she was important, like her opinion mattered. He also mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that Morgan could be a little intense. The day we drove to her apartment, I noticed something I didn't expect. Kieran was nervous. Not shaking, not panicking, just different. He checked his hair in the car mirror, asked me twice if I felt okay, if I was comfortable. I thought it was sweet. I thought it meant he cared. Morgan's apartment was in one of those expensive high-rise buildings downtown, marble floors, quiet elevators, the kind of lobby that smells like money. When she opened the door, I immediately saw the resemblance. Same eyes, same jawline, same confident posture. But Morgan had an edge Kieran didn't. She looked polished, controlled, like she was always evaluating. She smiled at me, and I could tell she'd perfected that smile over years of being the person in the room who decided what was good enough. The first hour went fine. She asked about my job, my hobbies. She seemed engaged. She made dinner, and we sat at her table making polite conversation like normal adults, and I started to relax. I remember thinking, maybe I've been overthinking this. Maybe she'll actually like me. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Her hallway was long, too long. The kind that makes you feel like you're walking through a quiet tunnel. I did what I needed to do, washed my hands, took a breath, and started walking back toward the living room. And then I heard their voices, clear as if they were standing right beside me. Morgan's tone had changed completely. Lower, sharper, less polite. I slowed down. Then I stopped. Because I realized they didn't know I could hear them. And I didn't know yet that the next few seconds would undo everything Kieran had built in me. I stood there in the hallway, one hand pressed lightly against the wall, my heartbeat loud enough that I was sure it would give me away. Morgan's voice floated toward me first, low, irritated, stripped of the polite friendliness she'd used all evening. "I just don't get it," she said. "You're too pretty to be settling like this." There was a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to make you hope, briefly, that the next words will save you. Kieran sighed. Not defensively, not angrily, just tired. "Morgan," he said, "it's not like that." I held my breath. She laughed softly, not amused, more like disappointed. "Come on," she replied. "Be honest. You could do better. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it." My stomach dropped. I told myself to move, to walk back into the living room, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But my body didn't listen. Then she said it. "She's not attractive, Kieran. I mean, she's nice, sweet, but let's not pretend she's in your league." Ugly. She didn't say it with cruelty. She didn't spit it out like an insult. She said it like she was pointing out the weather. And then, before I could even process the word, I heard him laugh. It wasn't loud. It wasn't mean. It was that soft, uncomfortable chuckle people make when someone says something they don't fully agree with, but don't fully disagree with either. "Well," he said, "looks aren't everything." Morgan snorted. "That's what people say when they're settling." There was another pause, and then Kieran spoke again. "She treats me really well," he said. "She's kind, she's supportive, and our physical relationship is good." Each sentence landed like a separate blow, not because they were false, but because of what they weren't. He didn't say I was beautiful. He didn't say he wanted me. He didn't say he was attracted to me. He listed my value like a pros and cons chart. Morgan laughed again. "So you're settling for an ugly girlfriend because she's nice and sleeps with you." And this time, he didn't correct her. I don't remember how long I stood there. It could have been seconds. It could have been minutes. All I know is that something inside me went very still. When I finally forced myself to walk back into the living room, my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. My face hurt from smiling, but I smiled anyway. I sat down on the couch like nothing had happened. Kieran glanced at me and reached for my hand. His touch felt wrong. Not because it was rough or careless, but because it felt false now, like a performance I'd already seen behind the curtain. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Morgan talked about her job in finance, about her husband, about investments and trips and people I didn't know. I nodded when I was supposed to nod, laughed when laughter was expected. Inside, my mind replayed the hallway conversation over and over, each word echoing louder every time. When we finally left, Kieran asked me if I'd had a good time. I said, "Yeah, I'm just tired." He studied my face for a moment, like he sensed something was off, but then he smiled and kissed my temple. "You did great," he said. "She liked you." I almost laughed. The drive home was torture. The car was quiet except for the hum of the road. Kieran reached over at a red light and squeezed my knee affectionately. I stared straight ahead, watching the reflections of streetlights blur across the windshield. Every compliment he'd ever given me started to feel counterfeit. Every time he'd called me beautiful. Every photo he'd posted with comments turned off. Every reassuring word that had once felt like medicine. Now they felt like compensation. Over the next few days, something inside me shifted, subtly at first. When he told me I looked good, my mind whispered, "Compared to what?" When he reached for my hand in public, I wondered if he felt embarrassed. When he smiled at me across the room, I questioned whether it was affection or habit. I caught myself slouching again, avoiding mirrors, pulling my shoulders inward like I used to. He noticed. "Hey," he said one night, cupping my face gently. "You've been quiet lately. Did I do something?" I almost told him then. The words sat right behind my teeth. But admitting it meant admitting I'd been listening. Admitting I'd heard something I wasn't meant to hear. Admitting that his sister's words had hit every old wound I'd ever had. So I shook my head and said, "No, I'm fine." He smiled, relieved, and hugged me tighter. And that was when it hit me. He thought the problem was temporary. I knew it wasn't. Because once doubt gets planted, once you hear how someone really talks about you when they think you're not listening, love doesn't disappear overnight. It corrodes, quietly, constantly. And I had no idea yet that this was only the beginning. For 2 weeks after that night, I lived in a constant state of quiet unraveling. Nothing happened, and that was the problem. Kieran didn't change his behavior in any obvious way. If anything, he became more attentive, more affectionate. He brought me coffee in the mornings. He He texted during the day just to say he missed me. He planned dinners, movie nights, little moments that used to make me feel safe. Now they made my chest tighten. Every compliment felt rehearsed. Every touch felt like it came with a calculation I couldn't see. When he told me I was beautiful, I didn't hear it anymore. I heard his sister's voice instead. Calm, certain, dismissive. She's not attractive. I started losing sleep. At night, I'd lie beside him, staring at the ceiling while he slept peacefully next to me. His breathing was slow and even, one arm draped over my waist, like he owned the space there. Sometimes I'd turn my head just enough to look at his face in the dim light and wonder, what does he actually see when he looks at me? The doubt followed me everywhere. At work, I caught my reflection in dark computer screens and felt my stomach drop. On walks together, I noticed other women more, women who fit the kind of standard Morgan clearly worshipped. Tall, slim, effortlessly polished. I started comparing myself without meaning to. And the worst part? He noticed something was wrong and tried to fix it. One evening, while we were sitting on the couch, he turned toward me and said, "You know I'm really attracted to you, right?" It should have comforted me. Instead, my heart sank. Because attraction doesn't need reminders. I know, I said quickly, forcing a smile. He studied my face like he was searching for the right combination of words. "You just seem distant lately." I nodded. "Just tired." That became my answer for everything. I was tired. Tired of smiling. Tired of questioning every memory. Tired of wondering if the person I loved actually wanted me or if I was just the safest option. The inciting moment, the one that pushed everything from internal to unavoidable, came on an ordinary Saturday afternoon. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when he walked in and leaned against the doorframe, watching me. "You look really good today," he said. "I mean it." I froze. The words echoed in my head, but they didn't land. I put down the shirt I was holding and turned to face him. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Do you really think that?" I asked. He blinked. "Of course I do." Something in my expression must have changed because his confidence faltered. "What's going on?" he asked gently. "You're scaring me." I took a breath, then another. This was it. "I overheard you and your sister," I said. The color drained from his face. "When?" he asked. "At her apartment," I continued, my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. "In the hallway. I heard everything." The silence that followed was heavy, thick enough to suffocate. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted away for just a second too long. What did you hear?" he asked, even though we both knew. I swallowed. "I heard her call me ugly," I said, "and I heard you laugh. I heard you say you were with me because I was nice, because I treated you well, because the sex was good." His face twisted with something like panic. Emily, that's not what I meant," he said quickly, stepping toward me. "You took it out of context." "Then put it back into context," I replied, "because from where I was standing it sounded like you agree with her." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. "She's always like that," he said. "She's judgmental. She pushes. I didn't want to start an argument." "So you let her tear me down instead?" I asked. He stopped pacing. "I didn't think you'd hear it," he said. The words hit harder than anything else. Not I didn't mean it. Not I was wrong. Just I didn't think you'd hear it. I felt something inside me crack. "Do you find me attractive?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "Not long. Just long enough." "Yes," he said. "Of course I do." "Then tell me why," I said. Another pause. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and finally said, "You make me feel good. You're warm. You're comforting. Being with you feels safe." I stared at him. "That's not what I asked." He looked overwhelmed now, defensive. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Why are you turning this into something it's not?" "Because I need to know," I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. "I need to know if the man I love actually wants me, or if he just doesn't want to be alone." He reached for me. I stepped back. That moment, the space between us, the words he couldn't say, that was the real inciting incident. Because in that silence, I realized something terrifying. If someone truly desires you, they don't struggle to explain why. And suddenly, everything I'd been afraid to admit became impossible to ignore. After that conversation, nothing exploded. There was no screaming match, no slammed doors, no dramatic breakup scene where one of us stormed out into the night. Instead, something quieter happened. Something worse. We kept living together, but the air between us felt permanently altered, like a room where something had broken and everyone was pretending not to hear the glass crunching under their feet. That night, we went to bed without resolving anything. Kieran lay beside me, stiff and silent, his back turned. I stared at the wall, replaying the moment he hesitated before answering my question. That hesitation became the loudest thing in the room. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because my body felt numb, like it had shut down to protect itself. The next few days passed in a strange blur. Kieran tried to act normal. He made breakfast, asked about my day, texted me memes like he always had. But now, every small gesture felt heavy with intention. When he said, "You look nice," I wondered if he was trying to reassure me or reassure himself. When he hugged me, I wondered if it was affection or guilt. When he smiled, I searched his face for certainty and found only effort. I started questioning myself instead. Am I overreacting? Did I misunderstand? Am I letting my old insecurities ruin something good? I hated that part the most, because I wasn't just doubting him anymore. I was doubting my right to be hurt. One evening, as we were washing dishes together, he said softly, "I feel like you don't trust me anymore." I didn't look at him. "I don't know how to," I replied. He sighed. "I've been with you for 2 years. Doesn't that count for something?" I turned off the water and finally faced him. "It would," I said, "if I didn't feel like I'm constantly being measured against something I'll never be." "That's not fair," he said quickly. "I'm not comparing you to anyone." "But you let your sister do it," I said, "and you didn't stop her?" He looked down at the sink. I didn't know how. That answer haunted me. Because love shouldn't require rehearsed courage. I started pulling inward without meaning to. I stopped initiating affection. I stopped changing clothes in front of him. I stopped believing him when he touched me like he wanted me. And he noticed. He started trying harder. Too hard. He complimented me more, touched me more, planned dates out of nowhere. It felt like watching someone try to patch a crack in the wall without fixing the foundation underneath. One night while we were out at dinner, he reached across the table and said, "You know I choose you, right?" The word choose made my stomach turn. I nodded anyway. But inside, a different question kept circling. Why does choosing me feel like a sacrifice? I started reflecting on everything, every small moment I'd brushed aside before. The disabled comments on his social media posts, the way he talked about other women, never cruel, but always observant. The way his sister's opinions seemed to carry more weight than he admitted. I asked myself questions I'd avoided for weeks. If I hadn't overheard that conversation, would anything actually be different? Would I still be living in a version of reality built on half-truths? I didn't confront him again right away. Instead, I watched, listened, felt, and slowly I realized something painful. Even if he did find me attractive, the damage was already done. Because attraction isn't just about desire. It's about certainty. And I didn't feel certain anymore. The version of myself I'd worked so hard to become, the woman who walked taller, who believed she was wanted, was slipping away. And I didn't know if this relationship was worth losing her over. Things didn't fall apart all at once. They tightened, like a rope being pulled a little more each day, slow enough that you don't notice until breathing becomes hard. Kieran became attentive in a way that felt unfamiliar. He started asking where I was going, who I'd be with, when I'd be home. Not aggressively, not suspiciously, always framed as concern. "Just checking. Text me when you get there. I miss you. How long will you be?" At first, I told myself it was sweet, that he was trying to reconnect. But the questions kept coming. If I went out with friends, he'd ask for details afterward. Who was there, what we talked about, how long I stayed. If I stayed late at work, he'd text more than usual. If I didn't reply quickly, he'd follow up with a casual, "Everything okay?" I started feeling watched. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, constant way that made me second-guess ordinary choices. Meanwhile, his compliments changed tone. Before, they'd been spontaneous, effortless. Now they sounded deliberate, almost instructional. "You know, a lot of guys would kill to be with you. I'm lucky. You realize that, right? I don't care what anyone else thinks." Each sentence felt like it was trying to cover something up, like reassurance spoken too loudly in a room where doubt had already settled. Then came his sister. Morgan started texting him more. I knew because he'd glance at his phone and stiffen, or excuse himself to take calls in another room. Once, I walked past the balcony and heard her voice through the open door, sharp, emotional, demanding. "You're really going to throw this away?" she said. "After everything?" When he came back inside, he looked irritated and distracted. "What did she want?" I asked. He shrugged. "Same stuff. She's worried about me." That word, worried, sat wrong. Because Morgan didn't worry. She evaluated. The tension between us grew heavier. Arguments started over nothing. Laundry, dishes, plans that hadn't even been made yet. One night, after I canceled dinner plans because I was exhausted, he snapped. "You've been pulling away for weeks," he said. "Do you even want to be here anymore?" I stared at him, stunned. "I'm still here," I replied. "I just don't feel safe." "Safe?" he echoed, offended. "From what?" "From doubting myself every time you touch me," I said. from wondering if I'm enough. He looked genuinely hurt. That's not fair, he said. I've been doing everything I can. And that was when I understood something crucial. He wasn't trying to understand my pain. He was trying to fix it, quickly, efficiently, so things could go back to normal. But there was no normal anymore. The escalation peaked the night I caught him scrolling through my social media. Not secretly. He was sitting right next to me on the couch, his phone angled just enough that I could see my own profile reflected in his screen. He was reading comments, studying likes, clicking through people's profiles. "What are you doing?" I asked. He flinched. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "Just curious." "About what?" He hesitated. Again. "About who's paying attention to you." Something cold settled in my chest. "I don't belong to you," I said quietly. He looked at me, like that thought had never occurred to him. "I know," he said. "I just don't want to lose you." But fear doesn't feel like love when it starts turning into control. And that night, lying awake beside him, I realized this wasn't just about attraction anymore. This was about insecurity growing teeth. And I didn't know how much longer I could stay without disappearing back into the version of myself I'd fought so hard to escape. The lowest point didn't arrive with shouting or betrayal. It arrived quietly, on a Tuesday night, while I was sitting alone in my car. I had just left dinner with a friend. Nothing unusual, nothing secretive. We'd talked about work, about movies, about life drifting in directions neither of us had planned. I should have felt relaxed. Instead, my chest was tight. I sat there in the parking lot longer than necessary, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at my reflection in the windshield. The streetlights cast harsh shadows across my face, and suddenly I couldn't stop seeing myself the way Morgan had described me. Plain, unremarkable, convenient. When I got home, Kieran was already there. He looked up immediately, too quickly. "Hey," he said, "how was dinner?" "Fine," I replied, setting my bag down. "With who?" I paused. "You already know," I said carefully. "I told you earlier." He nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. "How long were you out?" I felt something snap, not loudly, but definitively. "Why are you asking like that?" I said. He sighed, rubbing his face. "I just worry. You've been distant. I don't want you pulling away without telling me." "I'm pulling away because I don't feel wanted," I said, my voice cracking despite my effort to keep it steady. "That's not true," he said immediately. "I want you." "But you don't desire me," I replied, "and there's a difference." The silence that followed was unbearable. He didn't deny it. He just looked tired. "I'm doing my best," he said quietly. "Isn't that enough?" That question broke something in me, because love shouldn't feel like a performance review. That night, after he fell asleep, I got up and went to the bathroom. I stood in front of the mirror under harsh light and studied myself like a stranger would. My body, my face, the lines that appeared when I smiled, the softness I'd once learned to accept. And for the first time in years, I hated what I saw. Not because it was ugly, but because someone I loved had made me question whether it was ever worthy of desire at all. I slid down onto the bathroom floor, my back against the cabinet, my arms wrapped around my knees. I cried silently. Not for him, for me. For the girl who had finally started believing she was enough, and was now unlearning that lesson piece by piece. I realized then that staying was costing me more than leaving ever would. Because every day I stayed, I was shrinking. And if I stayed long enough, I knew exactly who I'd become again. The girl who avoided mirrors. The girl who apologized for existing. The girl who settled for being tolerated instead of chosen. That night I didn't make a decision. But I touched the bottom. And once you hit it, the only honest direction left is up. The turning point didn't come from Kieran. It came from someone I didn't expect. Morgan. 3 days after my breakdown in the bathroom, Kieran told me she wanted to talk to me. Alone. The request made my stomach knot immediately. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "She insists," he replied. "She said it's important." Important was never a good word when it came to Morgan. But something in me, maybe exhaustion, maybe clarity, decided I was done avoiding discomfort. "Fine," I said. "One conversation." We met at a quiet cafe downtown. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. Morgan arrived exactly on time, dressed impeccably as always. But something was different. The sharp confidence she carried before had dulled around the edges. She didn't smile when she sat down. She didn't order coffee. She looked tired. "I'll get straight to the point," she said. "I owe you an apology." I blinked, caught off guard. "For what?" I asked. "For what I said about you," she continued, "and for what I've been doing for months." My heart started pounding. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding something in for a long time. "I wasn't talking about you that night," she said. "Not really." I frowned. "You called me ugly." "I did," she admitted, "but it wasn't about your face." I didn't respond. She looked down at her hands. It was about my life. She told me then about her marriage, about her husband, about how he'd never really wanted her, how he criticized her body, how he made her feel invisible unless she was useful or impressive. He married me because I looked good on paper, she said bitterly, not because he desired me. My chest tightened. And then I watched my younger brother, she continued, fall in love with someone who genuinely adored him, someone who made him soft, happy, secure. She finally looked at me, and I hated you for it. The words hung heavy between us. I couldn't stand it, she said, seeing you have something I never did. So I started planting doubt. I pushed. I criticized. I framed it as concern, but it wasn't. She swallowed. I wanted you to feel small, because that's how I felt every day. I sat there in silence, processing. Did Kieran agree with you? I asked finally. She shook her head. No, she said. He defended you, over and over. That night was the first time he didn't push back, and only because he was tired of fighting me. That detail landed harder than I expected. He loves you, she said quietly. He always has. I nodded slowly. I believe you, I said, but that doesn't change what happened. She didn't argue. I know, she said. I just couldn't let you walk away thinking you were the problem. When I got home, I didn't feel relieved. I felt awake. Because the truth didn't erase the damage. It clarified it. Morgan hadn't created my doubt alone. She'd only activated something Kieran hadn't protected me from. That night, I sat across from him at our kitchen table. I'm leaving, I said calmly. His face went pale. Because of my sister? No, I replied, because even after everything, I still don't feel chosen. He reached for my hand. I didn't take it. I need to be with someone who doesn't let doubt grow in the first place, I said. Someone who doesn't hesitate when asked why they want me. He cried. I didn't, because for the first time, I wasn't losing myself. I was choosing myself. The fallout didn't explode the way I'd imagined it might. There were no screaming phone calls, no dramatic confrontations in public places, no long speeches meant to make someone the villain. Instead, everything unraveled with a quiet finality that felt heavier than noise. Kieran didn't try to stop me from leaving that night. He didn't block the doorway. He didn't bargain. He didn't promise to change. He just sat there at the kitchen table, shoulders slumped, staring at the wood grain like it might rearrange itself into a different ending. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said finally. I know, I replied. That was the problem. Intent didn't matter anymore. Impact did. I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend for a few days. The drive over felt surreal, like I was watching my life from the outside, waiting for the moment when panic would hit. It didn't. What hit instead was a strange, fragile calm. The next few weeks were messy in practical ways. We had to untangle routines, divide shared things, explain to friends why we'd suddenly stopped showing up together. People asked questions. Some of them looked at me with sympathy, others with confusion. But he was so good to you, one friend said. He always talked about how lucky he was, said another. I nodded politely and changed the subject. Because how do you explain that someone can care deeply about you and still make you feel unwanted? Morgan didn't disappear quietly. She called me once after I moved out. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she said, her voice strained. But I need you to know, I told him everything. I told him this was on me. I closed my eyes. It wasn't only on you, I said, but I appreciate you telling the truth. She didn't argue. I heard through mutual friends that her marriage had finally imploded. Divorce papers, quiet separation. No dramatic announcements, just the slow collapse of something built on appearances instead of affection. Kieran withdrew after I left. He stopped posting online, stopped showing up to group events, stopped pretending he was okay. Friends told me he looked lost. I believed them, but I also knew something else. Loss is not the same as accountability. And missing someone doesn't mean you were ready to love them the way they deserved. The real fallout wasn't public. It was internal. For the first time in years, I had to sit with myself, without someone else's gaze shaping how I felt about my body, my worth, my desirability. At first, that silence was terrifying. I caught myself reaching for my phone to see if anyone had texted. I stared at mirrors again, searching for confirmation. I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. I started sleeping better. I laughed more easily. I stood straighter without realizing it. The version of me that had been shrinking began to return. And I understood then that walking away wasn't punishment. It was release. It's been 2 months since I left. That number still surprises me sometimes. How quickly life keeps moving, even after something you thought was permanent falls apart. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights I reached for my phone out of habit. Mornings I woke up expecting to hear him in the kitchen. Moments when loneliness crept in and whispered that maybe I'd overreacted. But then I'd remember the hallway, the laughter, the hesitation, and the way my confidence had been quietly bleeding out long before I admitted it, and I knew I'd made the right choice. I didn't leave because someone called me ugly. I left because the person who claimed to love me didn't protect me from that narrative. Love, real love, doesn't let doubt take root and grow unchecked. It doesn't require explanations when asked why it exists. It doesn't make you feel like a consolation prize. Since the breakup, I've been rebuilding. Not dramatically, not perfectly. I go to the gym again, but this time without hiding. I meet friends without checking my reflection first. I wear clothes because I like them, not because they make me look acceptable. The mirror still catches me off guard sometimes. Old habits don't vanish overnight. But when I look at myself now, I don't see a problem to be solved. I see someone who learned something the hard way. Being chosen isn't enough if you don't feel desired. Being loved isn't enough if it comes with quiet conditions. And staying isn't noble if it costs you your sense of self. I don't hate Kieran. I don't even think he's a bad person. I think he was someone who cared, but didn't have the courage to defend what mattered when it counted. And that matters more than intentions. As for Morgan, I don't carry anger toward her anymore. She was hurting and wanted company in that hurt. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it explains it. I'm not rushing into dating. When I do, I know what I'll be looking for. Not perfection, not approval from family, not constant reassurance. Just this, someone who never hesitates when asked why they want me. Someone who chooses me out loud and backs it up in private. Someone whose love doesn't make me smaller. If you're listening to this and wondering whether you're being too sensitive, if you've ever felt like you're loved in theory, but not in desire, trust that feeling. Because confidence can take years to build, and only one moment of truth to dismantle. Choose the life where you don't have to question whether you're enough. That's where healing begins.